Hello, great to see you again. So after talking a lot of the topics on the C2M, let's go back to the framework. And I think where we left was around business objects. We had a few sessions talk about different aspects of the business object. Um, so we move from the data aspect now towards the process aspect of the framework. So we will start to talk about this business service, and I think it is a very important um, feature in the application, and we can achieve a lot of great things with this feature using business service. Let's start. Okay, so we break it down to four sections, overview, and then we look at the query against change. This is more around what the business service can do uh, in the cases of query the data or change the data. And so we will compare the options and see which one is more proper to use at which circumstances. And then we will look at some of the base services, and I would like to suggest and hopefully give you some idea on what type of business service we normally want to implement in the project. At last, we look at the areas related to business service to wrap it up. Okay, let's start with the overview. So, the first thing I would say we look at the concept of business service is it's used to expose backend service. So it may be invoked by a script, a zone, or a map to retrieve information on performing functions, depending on the related service. So over here, we can see the triggering point could be of the business service could be a script, which you can add that into a data area and use the calling the business service in the script or in a zone and also in a UI map, because in a UI map you could calling the business service directly to retrieve the value at runtime, for example. The second point I would like to talk about is the business service actually front end the service in the same way as business object front end of a maintenance object. So we all know business object, maintenance object, they are metadata based on what we have discussed. Metadata is a application level of presentation of the data from database. Okay, so similarly, the service when we're talking about service is probably it's similar to the data. I mean, it can be data related service. Let's say for bill, you could have service like read bill, update bill, delete bill, or you can have a custom service involve multiple objects as a query, for example. So business service is really the tool which we can implement on the application level to run the process against the data, and that's what we can. That's one of the tool we utilize to write our logic or implement the custom logic for the project. Now, the last thing I would say is the limited number of maintenance object cannot be added, changed, or deleted via BO. These typically are transaction-oriented MOs like bill payment adjustment. Uh, so in CCMB tables, in CCMB object, many of them initially they don't have a business object. They are working against maintenance object. In these cases, you are not able to load up a business object at runtime just using the BO because if you can't define a BO, you can't run. For example, in the script, you cannot call the invoke BO function for that record. So in that case, what we need to do is we do need to write a business service to deal with these deal with records in the base tables. On the right hand side, what I've tried to put down is this is a very simple relation diagram on the business service, and if you look at the business service, it's a type of service where in the service, for example, a service script is calling a business service, and within the steps, we have one type of the step is called invoke business service. But obviously, you can call in the business service using added data as long as you include that in the data area. So this is where the business service can be triggered. Besides that, we mentioned about zone and the map. They can also call in business service at runtime. Okay, so let's have a look at what the business service can do. So I would like to break the business service into two categories. The first type I would say is to query the data from the backend of the database, or query the data from the front end using the metadata layer, for example, business object. The second category is actually to change the data. So if we want to perform operation on data, for example, insert, update, or removal, we could use business service to do that. But I would like to discuss the benefits, the pro and cons in each of the options. So first of all, let's look at query. Okay, on query, as I said, you can use the metadata business object schema. So for example, if you looking at a device object, you want to include the new records in terms of not just the base attributes, but also all the custom attributes. For example, you have add them into the device characteristics. You can add them into this as a part of a schema. So when you are running things, running a command like invoke BO for read, all these attributes can be read when the BO is loaded. Now that requires a change on the business object, and that means a new schema is required, and you need to extend the base BO for device. If you don't want to do that and you don't actually use the business object that often, another option is you can create a business object and a zone behind the business object. Within the zone, you can write a SQL, and in that case, you can load all the attributes within the XML, within the um, SQL, and the result will be returned as the result of the business service. So these are two different ways of querying the data. Now, to change the data, you can also use something similar to the business objects. You create a custom schema for the business object, load it up, and then update the attributes as required. Or you can remove the object using the business object similarly. Now, another way of change the data is to utilize page maintenance using the Java program, and the Java program will be called by the business service. So in that case, you can write a custom program just doing a very specific thing for you, rather than going through the business objects. And these programs can be reused by the other people. Now, that gives us a few choices: business service, business object schema, or SQL. In different cases, I think we will look at what is more suitable to use each of the options in our later discussion. Right, part 3, let's look at the useful base services. Now, what I have tried to extract, so this is from the C2M documentation, and look at some of these fields, some of these business services, and they are very often used in the project. These are base functionality, and I think it is a good summary of what can be used, and there are more than these services, so feel free to explore in C2M to see which one can be used. But this provides a very good reference of what type of business service has been provided as a part of the base product, and how they are actually used. Okay, so let's have a look at what would you use. What's the use cases for the business service in your project potentially? So I've given 3 examples here. Let's say the first one is to upsert a characteristic. So characteristic happens for many objects. So it is data you can extend for custom attributes for these objects. For example, service points, device bill, etc. Now, what I would suggest is, if you have a lot of the places you want to insert or update characteristic values, you should write a business service for it. Because if you don't actually write a business service for that, that means all the new custom attributes, you need to create a schema, include that in the schema for each of the objects. However, let's say we create a business service for upsert service point characteristics. Then you can pass in the values for the characteristic type, the characteristic type code and characteristic value, and using the Java-based programming at the backend for the, as we discussed, the page maintenance. Um, you can use these common routines to insert service point. In that case, you don't have to change the build schema because you don't know how many characteristics will be required. The only so the business service becomes a generic routine as long as you pass in the right characteristic code. And in this case, I would say limited to absolutely needed because it involves Java programming, and I know um, we prefer a no code uh, option for many of the projects. But if these are the options needed in the project, we can add that in. Now the second one, for example, you want to run a CCMB financial analysis report. In this case, it involves not only the bill as we always talk, because the concept of CCMB financial is including all the transactions. So transaction can be added via bill payment, adjustment, for example. So all these objects could be adding financial transactions, and if you want to run any aggregation, including multiple criterias, it will be probably easier and quicker to implement in a SQL. And in that case, we will use the business object plus zone, which is backed by a SQL to achieve it. And it's not easily achievable on the build schema because here we are involving multiple objects. So this will be one of the options when you are looking at multi-objects, complex query. We can use the zone, the business service plus zone option. Now the last one is the record deletion for transaction data. Very often we see in the project we want to delete some of the transactional data. It's not always recommended, but it is needed. To delete data, very often you would see it's not achievable via the build schema. What we can do is we can create a business service, again, based because it's change of the data. So it will be based on the Java program on page maintenance, and we will be able to create a deletion service in these cases. Okay, anything else around this program for business service? Let's find out. So there's 2 points I would like to mention. First is save point. I'm not quite sure if you have touched upon this point, but in the system we do have a business service called F1 save point dispatcher. And this program actually allow you to run a particular program, for example, a script, a business service, and then capture the exception in this program, and you can decide whether this program should proceed or um, to be discarded, or any kind of error handling. So this is very similar to try and catch technique in the Java programming. With this business service, you will be able to do the try and catch in the scripts, for example, and this is something we use quite often because if we involve multiple, the high volume of data processing, we don't want some of the exception happening in the middle of the program and just stop all the processes. So this is one very important feature. The next one is the page maintenance type. So you can see in this business service schema below, we use the page action to tell, and it needs to be aligned with the Java code to tell what action it performs. So over here we could have update, delete, etc. So the Java understand what need to be performing using the page maintenance. Okay, so that is everything I would like to talk about, and thank you very much. See you next time.